Well, let's see. This is the usual disclosure. But actually what I want to disclose or tell you is that I think time has changed. One of the things is apparently I'm not supposed to say I'm well. I'm supposed to say I'm good. If I say I'm well at home, my kids say, oh, Dad, you know. Well, 40 years ago when we get into this business, we use a set of different languages and terms. And in fact, I think I wrote a paper and gave one of the first talks when we implemented Build for Nothing in the community, titled Dancing with Strangers. You do the Macarena and we do the funky chicken. And that was the title of the talk. Now, I also wrote a piece called What is in a Name? But okay, I wouldn't get into it. But obviously, a lot of the language, the terms that we use, kind of sounds a bit off-base these days. But habits, old habits are difficult to change. As you get older, it's even harder. So what I would like to tell you is that if I slip and say something that is not up to date enough, remember what I'm trying to say is I'm good. Okay. So there are a couple of things I want you to notice on this slide. The first thing is that I'm retired. You see that? And the picture of the book is sort of a confession. I'm such a miserable guy to promote my own book in my neighborhood. I do such a poor job. People ask me about the book. I said, well, I didn't bring a copy. That's how good a book peddler I am. But what I really want you to notice is that my email address is still there, and it still works. It's a very simple email address, L as in love, lwater@ucla.edu. And if you want to get in touch, that's how you do that. Now, the talk is about research in methamphetamine. And so let me begin by asking you a question. How many of you have had an experience with meth? I don't have to stand up or raise your hand. We're not looking for confession. I actually don't know the local laws, so just keep that in mind. And then why I'm asking you a next different question. How many of you had an experience of falling in love? Remember what it was like? Well, okay, just to serve as a reminder, you remember like your pupil gets big and your mouth gets dry and your palm gets wet, right? Your blood pressure go up, and then your blood sugar spikes and your stress hormone, cortisol levels go up, and then your immune response go down, which is the price you pay for it, okay? The player in this scenario is dopamine. Now, true, there are a couple other players who help out, like oxytocin, which is our cuddling, bonding hormone, and the norepinephrine that give you that big charge. But basically, the big player is dopamine. And so, if you think about it, addiction and love are actually chemical cousins. They are very close, aren't they? Yeah, maybe even sisters. So, dopamine is what we call our motivational or feel-good hormone in the brain. It makes us want to do it again, to repeat experience. But dopamine is also involved in another set of brain activity, which is learning and memory. And it's a special kind of learning, what we call conditional learning or the Pavlovian learning. The key essential feature of that is that we incorporate the experience, the surrounding and everything into the memory itself. And that makes the memory more powerful is what we call a value-added memory. Or, Nora Volker loved to use the term salience. Well, salience simply means added value, okay? It's more relevant. So because of that, it makes the memory more powerful to drive the behavior. And that's how we get addicted. Whether it's smoking or cocaine or morphine or whatever. Now, just to put all of us on the same level, let's say afternoon like this, we're all sitting here, not much is happening. So let's say our dopamine level is 100, okay? We just had a good coffee break, get some snack, 150, all right? If we sneak out and have a sex, 200, all right? Smoke a cigarette, 250. Yeah. See, that's why people smoke after they have sex, not before. See? Cocaine, morphine, 300. Meth, 1,000. See? That's why meth is so much more powerful and also so much more harmful. Now, so if you think about it, then all the methamphetamine research comes to down one thing. It's coming down to playing with dopamine numbers, isn't it? And it's also difficult to do because it's so close to love. Nobody really wants to tinker with love. After all, it is mainly a spindle thing, we call it. But basically, doing methamphetamine research is playing around, tinkering with dopamine numbers. And there are a number of ways to do it. You can reduce the dopamine effect directly, even with another less powerful amphetamine. Or you can enhance the inhibitory activity of GABA to dampen the effect of dopamine. Or we know that most of the drug effects are happening in the subcortical limbic reward system, and therefore, if we can bring in more cortical control, we could have an effect on that too. So cortical or cognitive enhancement is another way to do it. Or we can combine one or two of these strategies together, and then we can think about some new ways of doing things. So that's what we've been doing the last year. Now here, for example, is a study that's actually done in the neighborhood. Jason White and the group here in Australia did a study with dextroamphetamine itself. And lo and behold, there was some promising effect, but not enough to really get the FDA impressed enough to give up. So directly. So the next we try, we'll kick off the GABA, so inhibitory thing. So this is a leftover slide from one of our investigators' meetings down in Las Vegas. And we end up with a pretty nice song, we thought. And he said, well, since the meth left me, I got a new place to dwell. It's down the end of GABA Street in the Methamphetamine Hotel. Well, we end up with we thought was a pretty good song after Elvis. But of course, it didn't become a hit. That's why you never heard of it. And the study didn't become a hit either. So there you go. So Methamphetamine, up the game out, didn't do much. So now we try cognitive enhancer, see? Well, modafinil was a pretty good drug, and in the lab, you can show that under the influence of modafinil, people make better decisions, and they make fewer mistakes. Here, for example, is the stop signal reaction time that some of you are familiar with, which is that you move towards a decision, and then you suddenly will tell to change the direction, and how quickly you can change that, or how many mistakes you make, is a good measure of how much cortical activity or control you have. And lo and behold, modafinil works quite well in this situation. And so let's try it. But unfortunately, what you end up with is a group of smarter math users who use as much math, but smarter. So next, we now try a combination. You know, it's that maybe we can combine two of the strategies. And there was an indication that naltrexone actually might have an effect in reducing methamphetamine use, as you can see that, thanks to the data from that. And we also know that bupropion may actually have some effect. And so we combine these two, and then we've been at this game now, by this time, a long time, a couple of decades at least. So we thought, well, maybe we should also try a new strategy. This is a new approach. In the old days, you start studying a medication by the traditional two-group design that we all do, phase 2 clinical trial, an active drug and a placebo. But in this new scenario, what you do is you statistically calculate what a responder is, and you say to yourself, if we enroll a certain number of subjects into the trial, and we get beyond a certain number of responders, then we can say to ourselves, this is more than chance. So there's a signal there that this happened more than chance. And in this particular case, we figure if we enroll 20 subjects and we get 3 responders or more, then we have a sort of preliminary indication that this response rate is more than chance. And so we can go on and enroll another 29 subjects for a total of 49. And now out of the 49, we're looking for 9 responders or more. If we don't get 9, we just forget it and move on to the next one. But if we get 9 or more, then we are confident enough to say we can skip that expensive and time-consuming early phase 2, phase 3 thing and move on to a real big clinical trial. And this is what we did. Now, to do that, of course, you need to define what a responder is. And in this case, we said during the evaluation period, we collected 8 urines, and we want to make sure that 6 of them were positive for methamphetamine, which tells us that you're using enough to get in trouble. And then in the treatment phase, we take your last 4 weeks, and each week we collect 3 urine samples, and out of the 12, we want 3/4 of them no amphetamine. And not only that, we want the last urine sample to be amphetamine-free, and it has to be collected in the last week, in your last visit. So with that bar set, this is what we did. And lo and behold, after our first 20, we get more than 3. It was, we were blinded, so somebody told us, hey, buddies, you got more than 3. You can go ahead and enroll the next 29. So we did. And out of the 49, we actually get 11 responders. So now we're confident that there we are. We got a signal, and so now we are doing a big study to follow up. Now, the reason I don't have a slide to show you on the big study is I have retired, as you see. And now I'm like the super consultant. It's like a Holy Spirit you hobble around. You don't do much, you know, exactly, but you kind of follow along here. But when you retire, you start to have time to reflect on things. You say, you know, we've been doing this thing now for 30 years, and we haven't come up with anything, you know. Maybe we weren't doing something right. Have we missed something? Are we missing the forest for the trees? And was reminded of this couple of sayings that say, where data ends, stories begin. You know, or the data comes and go, but stories stay. And you suddenly realize that there was an old saying, said, when you're up to your asses in alligators, you tend to forget that the original objective was to drain the swamp. And the original idea of doing research was to make a difference in the patient's life. And now we're getting better and better about studying the disease, and we're moving farther and farther away from patients. And pretty soon, we can do all our fancy research without any patients. I mean, these days, we got their demographics on the computer, we got their urine data, we got their imaging data, we got their DNA. We can do everything we do. We don't need any patients to do research. So when you retire, you tend to think back about what exactly, what's going on? What are we doing, really? So here's a quote from a book. It says, a patient long before she becomes the subject of medical scrutiny is at first simply a storyteller, a narrator of suffering, a traveler who has visited the land of the ill. To relieve an illness, one must begin, therefore, by understanding the story. Now, this is not a quote from some fiction or novel or some book on philosophy. This is the quote on the first page of the story of the National Cancer Institute. And those guys are pretty hard-nosed scientists. They aren't exactly fooling around with having, they are hard science people, and yet they realize that all their work is meaningful only because it has made a difference in the life of their patients. I think some of you know Susan Sontag, who wrote about her own illness, said we all hold dual citizenships. We hold a citizenship in the land of the well, and we hold citizenship in the land of the sick. So it's all down to patient life. Well, how do you put it together? The intersection of a patient and the illness is, in fact, in their life story. And if you think about it, every one of our patients, meth users, is a broken life story. Nobody set out to say, when I was 12 or when I was 9, I said to myself, when I grow up, what I really want to do is become a meth user. They don't really do that. They set out in a search. It's kind of a quest, a life journey, look for something, happiness. But they fell off. Somewhere along the way, the journey fell off track. And they got trapped in this thing, what we call hedonic happiness, which is what drugs do for you. Remember, drugs will make you feel good, but it will not make you feel good about being yourself. No one ever said, it was such a great high. Man, I'm going to remember that for a long time and tell my grandkids about it. They don't. To do that, they need to have something to reflect on, that something make them feel good about being the person that they are to do that. So in a sense, our patients have a story that's broken, and we're all storytellers, and it's our job to come along and see if we can get their story up on track again. Now, how do you do that? Well, as soon as you say something about stories, your residents, your students, your fellows, and your colleagues, oh, come on, who has time, man, telling stories? What are you talking about? Well, human beings are called Homo sapiens, smart mammals. But we're also called Homo fictus, storytelling mammals. We're the only species on this earth that have stories. We're the only species that can imagine things. That's why we have a future. We can see the future. All the innovations that we have today come out of our ability to imagine. And so, so story doesn't have to be sort of so demanding that you cannot tell. I often say ask the residents, the last time you went to the bar, how long it took you before you become buddy-buddy with, the lady behind the bar? Chances are good that you haven't finished your first drink. That's how quickly you can. Now, the shortest story of the novel ever written was said to be written by Hemingway. But it's not The Omen and the Sea or For Whom the Bell Tolls. It only has 6 words. It says, for sale, baby shoes, never worn. That's the whole story. Now, the Bible, on the other hand, has 66 books. It's written by 39 authors over 600 years. So a theological professor decided to get his students, see whether they can sum up the Bible. And one of the theologians said, well, yeah, it's kind of a message from God to us. And it says, I love you, don't be stupid. Now, our best stories are actually the Arabian Night stories. We have the Arabian Night stories because Our Lady was a good storyteller. If she wasn't good, we wouldn't have these stories. Remember, she only had one chance. And we have these stories because she was a good storyteller. And her good storytelling changed her life, it saved her life, and also changed her husband's life. That's how we end up with these stories. So storytelling, in the beginning of medicine, all our predecessors, all they had was storytelling, really. They didn't have any kind of fancy stuff that we have. And that's the storytelling is still the basis of healing. Well, if you get into that idea, then you say, well, what do we know about storytelling, life philosophy, and life changes? It turns out that whether you believe in ancient philosophy or you believe in the newest contemplative neuroscience, the conclusion is quite clear. They both point to one thing, like a life that is based on an artist-centered life is one that gives you purpose and meaning. And what our patient lack is that kind of purpose and meaning in life, and we need to try to restore that. So it says doing good for someone else, which is what? The eudaimonic happiness, is better than having a good time, which is what drug use does, the hedonic happiness. So if you think about it, our whole purpose in treating our patients is to move them from a hedonic experience to a eudaimonic experience, isn't it? Now, eudaimonia is from two Greek words. Eu means happy or satisfying. Daimon is the base root of demon, see? It is spirit. So eudaimonia means living the life according to the spirit, the way life should be lived. Now, of course, it went back to the Greek mythology about these two guys, Daimon and Pythias. They were good buddies, students of Pythagoras, so they followed their teacher to Syracuse, where Pythias was accused of treason and sentenced to death. But Pythias asked the king, said, let me go home and take care of my affairs, and I will come back and face my fate. And the king said, yeah, right. You gotta go home and come back. I'll never see you again. You're out of my sight. And so Pythias' friend, Daimon, said to the king, said, please let my friend go. Don't worry, he'll come back. He's a man of honor. In the meantime, you can keep me. I'll stay here. And if he doesn't come back, you can execute me in his place. And the king said, what kind of a dumb shit are you? Okay, you want to do that? Fine. Your friend can go. So Pythias went home, and Daimon stays. And lo and behold, Pythias took care of things, and he came back. And the king was so impressed, he let both of them go, see? Now, of course, an artist-centered life doesn't really have to be so dramatic, Yeah, it's a day-to-day, everyday things can happen. Yeah. Now, my favorite is, if we really achieve and make good at what we do, what will happen? Now, I have these two favorite movies. The one, Spectre, you probably have seen this. It's a fairly new movie. Remember, at the end of the movie, 007, he finally got his enemy on the ground, right? He's about ready to shoot him. The guy looks up and he says, okay, go ahead. Okay, fine, it's the end of it. And he looked back and saw his girlfriend, right? And he emptied out the chamber of his gun and threw away the gun, and he said to the guy on the floor, I have better things to do. Now, if we can bring our patients to a point where they can say to their old hedonic drug-using life, say, I have better things to do. then I think we have achieved something. Now, at that point, then you can talk about meaningful life. The last movie was Lawrence Arabia. Everybody knows that. Remember that old classic? So Lawrence went through the desert all night, and he finally came up early morning on the bank of the Nile, and he looked across the Nile, and there's this guy on a motorcycle, and he's waving, saying, "Who are you? Who are you?" Well, it was kind of funny spot in the movie. But he really wasn't asking that guy. He's asking himself. He's saying, who am I? What am I doing here? What's it all this all about? Running around the desert all this time? What's the meaning of this? Now, if our patient can begin to say, what am I doing here? What's all the purpose of it? What are we doing on this earth? Then I think we have done what we need to do. And after all, if we do a good job in methamphetamine research, it's not just tinkering with our neurophysiological thing, neurochemistry. It is to make a difference in our life. And if we have done that, then I think that we have done meaningful amphetamine research. And with that, I thank you.